This is Dateline News and Conversation. We've got a great show tonight. Three of my really good friends are with us. Sylvia Demarest is back. Lisa Savage is back. And Sonja van Ende, a Dutch journalist, has been in Russia covering the war in Ukraine and doing an awful lot of really great journalism. So I want to welcome you all back to the show.
Thanks,
okay, so the first thing I want to ask, because I have two of you Americans, and Sonja, I know you're paying attention to news coming from all over the world. It may seem like it's old news, but the Biden-Trump debate and the subsequent chaos, craziness, really, in the United States. I'm going to start with you, Lisa. Tell me, what were your thoughts on this debate, and what's the fallout been like?
Yes, and thanks, Sylvia and Sonja, for being here. It's great to see you all. The debate, I think debate is a misnomer. There was nothing about that was a debate. It was a performance with very biased moderators lobbing softball questions that avoided key issues like foreign policy for the most part. And obviously, Joe Biden acted as far gone in dementia as he is, and Trump acted like himself. So no surprises there. But, you know, it reminds me more of a world championship wrestling match than an actual discussion of substantive issues, which a debate is supposed to be. The fallout has been among my crowd, nothing, no surprises. But of course, among loyal Democrats, they're now pretending to freak out because the president doesn't appear mentally competent to do his job. I'm with opinionators like Caitlin Johnstone, the Australian blogger, who said it just reveals the extent to which the American president doesn't decide anything, doesn't have the nuclear hot button. You know, they're just a celebrity spokesperson for the real corporate rulers. And it doesn't really matter if they're mentally incompetent because they're not deciding anything anyway. But that's an inconvenient truth. It's embarrassing to the Democratic establishment. The latest, when I got up this morning, they're going to hold interview various possible alternate candidates, and they'll get interviewed by celebrities like Oprah or Stephen Colbert or even Taylor Swift. And then the public will vote quickly on which one of those alternative candidates that that celebrity brought on was the best. And then the super delegates will go into the smoke-filled back room and select the Democratic nominee, which is how it usually works. So Addisler of Hollywood celebrity it's like they're performing consulting the public, but they're not really consulting the public. Obviously, the nominating process was supposed to bring up the candidates with the most public support, but that has long since ceased happening. And again, you know, the illusion is falling away at this point.
Yeah, crazy, absolutely crazy. Three-ring circus going on there. Sylvia, what were your thoughts? The debate and the fallout?
Well, frankly, we knew back in 2019 that Joe Biden didn't have all of his marbles. That was very, very clear. It was discussed at the time. It just wasn't discussed in the mainstream media. And so what we have here is we have a very controlled information environment throughout the Western world, wherever the mainstream media is active. And in that controlled environment, things like the mental competence of the American president, particularly if he has the approval of the ruling class, is simply not allowed as part of the discussion. So the fact that these people are now all claiming that they've been fooled or that, you know, they weren't advised of what was happening is a bunch of BS, because everybody saw what was going on. There's no question about it. The staff of the president surely knew. The White House reporters surely knew. The people that travel surely knew. Otherwise, why was Biden completely hidden away during the 2020 campaign, where he did not campaign at all, and has been hidden away ever since he has been in office? He spends most of his time in Delaware. When he's there, members of the White House staff have been asking for some time, how are decisions made here? We never get a readout from any discussion with the president. We never see how any of these decisions are made. And we can discuss later, if you like, what the power structure is behind this and how this has worked out in terms of the staffing of the White House and the national security and administrative state. But it was a convenient mechanism for the power structure to simply get this front man, who's never been much of anything throughout his entire career, and to put him up there and let him go shout at the cameras every once in a while after he's been jacked up on medication. But that's what's been going on now for 4 or 5 years. And so I'm not surprised, but I am surprised at the so-called surprise from the mainstream media and the fellow travelers within the Democratic Party and the power structure within the United States. It's sad, but it's the way it is. The voters don't want any of this. They haven't wanted any of this for decades. What voters want doesn't matter. Elections don't matter. What the campaign rhetoric is doesn't matter. There's an agenda, and the agenda here was very, very clear. They wanted to start the war against Russia. They wanted to finish the expulsion of the Palestinians. They wanted to enforce the situation with the climate policy, and so the Green New Deal was passed with billions that nobody knows how it's being handed out, and they wanted to let a lot more illegal immigrants in, and that has been the policy, and that's what's been happening for the last 4 years.
Yeah. As an American, it's kind of shameful, really. I'm embarrassed when Russians bring it up to me. And they think Trump is going to be the president, but they say it's really embarrassing when they see these clips, these video clips of Joseph Biden. Anyway, Sonja, living in Russia now and working in Russia for quite some time and coming from the Netherlands, what was your take on the American debate?
And what can I say as a European? I mean, I follow it and I think it's a madhouse there. That's my opinion. But that's the same for Europe. So that's no big difference. But yeah, there are two presidents you can elect, and that's Trump. Well, my personal opinion is that if you choose Trump or Biden, it's the same. You know, Biden is like, he's a warmonger, in my opinion, what he does or what his policy is. He not do it himself because I don't think he can do much anymore. But his policy towards Russia, of course, what can I say? I have no words. I know it's the lobby behind him who's doing it. But some people in Russia think, okay, you know, with Trump, it will be all okay. But I don't think so, because they have nothing to say, actually. You know, they are just puppets. They are there. And look what Trump has done. I mean, he has abolished 5 treaties. The INS Treaty, the Iran Treaty. He moved the embassy from, Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Space Treaty, he abolished that. So, I mean, he did all things wrong. And now he's saying, okay, I want to make peace with Ukraine or with Russia about Ukraine. And if I'm president, within 24 hours, it will be okay. Well, I don't think so. And also he's a Zionist. So there will be a big war in the Middle East because he will support Israel to make war with Iran. So, I mean, it's like a show, and they put some puppets there, like in Europe. And actually, it's shameful when we see this. And I think it's time for Europe to stop and be a part of the US, because the US has long enough countries if we see all the bases in Germany and other countries, it has to stop. This has to stop. NATO has to stop. And yeah, it makes me ashamed as well, because the Netherlands is one of the sound supporters of the US and of course NATO. Now we have Mark Rutte, who will be the head of NATO. So it's very, very shameful. And yeah, people ask me here as well. And well, what can I say? The same as you, Regis. It's yeah, we cannot help it. We try to do something against it. I mean, I write and I show the things you do, and that's what we can do. But I mean, we are not in power to change anything. And yeah, I wish we were.
Thank you, Sonja. And I want to transition now, segue to the European elections. As an American living over here, I've been following them. They were like seismic results in the UK. Rishi Sunak, he's gone. In France, Emmanuel Macron is fighting for his life, and he's coming out appearing to be, not a very sharp tool. And then in Germany, Olaf Scholz is still hanging on. There were elections in other countries, and the people came out very strongly and loudly against this European Union leaders, and even some of their own elected presidents are not taking care of their needs. Sonja, what can you tell us about the elections in Europe just these past couple of days, weeks, and what does it mean for the future?
Not much good, because they all, if you, it's what I'm trying to write all the time, is if you choose the left or you choose the right, it's all the same. There's no difference anymore. Okay, one party says, oh yes, we are anti-refugee, we are anti-this, anti-that, and the other one said, oh, we are pro-European. But in the end, they all listen to what the policy of them. I think we're getting disturbed here sometimes. But the policy of NATO, they follow it. They follow the policy of the European Union. Look what happened to Italy. They have a right-wing government. Well, what is Meloni doing? She is following the EU. She is following the agenda for Russia, the war against Russia. And so it's not real. I think the elections are manipulated in France. I think the elections are manipulated in the Netherlands. We had elections in the Netherlands last year, November. Geert Wilders, the ultra right-wing person, won. But he has not had government. Well, he's in the government somehow, but they make a very strange government at the moment. And the policy is the same. The first thing they do is to get to the Ukrainian embassy and tell them, oh, we support you, and so on, so on. So there's no difference. And this is very sad. So yeah, okay. And in France, well, everybody thought Le Pen is winning. It's like when it was in the US, when they all thought the left was winning, and then the Democrats, and then Trump won. So it's the same thing. But they will not change anything. It will only create more and more chaos, especially in France. You have left, you have right, and it's a mess in Europe. It's a big, big mess. We have too many refugees. And then I will not even speak about Germany. Germany is a total catastrophe. In Germany, we have the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. But if they're going to rule, I don't think they will rule, because they will make a fake election. And this is the situation right now. And what can I say? Europe is a failing continent. It's failing in everything, in politics, in wealth. I mean, there are a lot of people now unemployed. There are a lot of people living on the streets like the US. And it's a failing continent. And maybe it should be the way it's going now. It's harsh, but I think the people, they made it themselves with all the sanctions. And so I don't think there's any difference now. It only creates more chaos, what we've seen now in Europe, unfortunately.
Let me ask you this, Sonja, before I turn it over to Sylvia and Lisa. for their views on what's happening in Europe. But do you see huge cracks in NATO and in the EU? Viktor Orban now is the president of the European Union. He's traveled to Russia, to Ukraine, and now China. Goodness knows where else he's going on a peace campaign. And he is supported, I think, only by Robert Fico in Slovakia. So do you see cracks now in the European Union and NATO?
Well, actually, no. Maybe it's strange for people that I say no. Hungary and Slovakia are very tiny countries. Like the Netherlands is more tiny, but okay, it's big in globalization, but they are tiny countries. And Hungary has for years already a problem in the EU because of Viktor Orban and because of his stance on Russia and so on. And Slovakia is a very small country, and yeah, okay, they don't want to do this policy for Russia and Ukraine. But the big countries, and that's France, that's Germany, and the Netherlands, even though it's small, Belgium, the Nordic countries now, they are the ones who are, who are creating the policy. And they are the ones who are conducting wars against, everywhere, especially now the war against Russia. This is how I call it. So I don't see any change. If people like von der Leyen, the Dutch one now, Mark Rutte, head of NATO, who the people are in power who are still there and who are following the agenda from the people behind them, the lobbies to make war against Russia, then I don't see any change. The change has to be enormous. It has to be something big. But until now, we didn't see. They are too powerful. I mean, Macron, okay, he lost, but he will still be there as a president. So everybody is saying that they want a war quickly. And unfortunately, I think what I heard, what I've read, what I see here every day, we see the terrorism from Ukraine. We see drones coming in Crimea, in Belgorod. Before that, it was Moscow, but also, Voronezh? Everywhere there are drones in the south, Rostov. So Ukraine is, it's heavily backed up by the US and by Europe. And the countries who are in power in Europe, who are the biggest countries, they decide the agenda, and not the small countries like Orban from Hungary or Fico from Slovakia. Although I think it was a very, very good effort from Orban, but he knows, and he said so in an interview, that in end effect, he will be the country left out from the European Union. So that says enough, I think, unfortunately. I mean, it's maybe a very dark picture here, but this is what I experience here and what I read, what I heard. And so, it's, I hope for the best, but this is what it is.
Thank you for that sober report, Sonja. I was trying.
Sorry.
I was trying to be a little hopeful, thinking, "Oh, I'm seeing big cracks in NATO and the EU," but
No.
I think I agree that nothing really is going to change. Sylvia, you've been following this, I know. What are your thoughts about what's going on in the EU and NATO?
Well, I think we all need to realize that the Western world is being run by two things, really: money, and that money is heavily concentrated in support of certain policies. And number two, what I'll call the wraparound smear, and that is the complete control of the media and the unanimity of the media in the coverage of certain subjects. So you have a choice as a politician. You can either have a great career and do exactly what the handlers tell you to do and what the handlers want you to do, or you can be destroyed by the media. And they will do that. And you can be cut out of the money system, and somebody else who's willing to go along with it will take your place. That's the way it is in Europe. That's the way it is in the United States. That's the way it is throughout the Western world. As far as the actual results, I find some things very unusual. For example, in England, Labour got 34% of the vote and actually got a much smaller amount, the turnout was very small. Labor got a smaller number of votes than they've gotten over the last several years, and they only got 34% of the total vote, but they got 64% of the seats. The Reform Party, Farange's party, got 14% of the vote, but they only got one seat, his seat. That's it, 14%, only one seat. There isn't very much difference really in between Labor and the Tories. They blew out any dissent within Labor that did not adhere to the money interest and the moneyed interest control of the media. They blew out those people, and so now you just have a bunch of people who do exactly as they're told. In France, the National Front got the most votes in the second round, and they got more votes than they got in the first round, and yet they came in third. So this is what you have, and what's happening really, and I don't understand why Europe is going along with this either. What's happening is the United States is managing this situation in such a way to where there's all this capital flight and flight of industry into the United States. So the United States is benefiting from Europe's decline. And the Europeans don't seem to be involved in trying to combat this. So money is flowing into the United States, which supports the U.S. economy. German industry is being devastated by high energy prices and all these sanctions against Russia, but they continue to play along because I guess the politicians know if they don't, they're going to be replaced by somebody who will play along. And so that industry is either fleeing to China or to the United States. So Europe is being hollowed out in a number of ways, and I think it's difficult for the people of Europe to be able to respond to this because there really isn't a democracy. The European Parliament is not democratically elected. The policies that are set within the European Union are not really set based on the wishes of the population within Europe. And some of the policies that are being set are actually designed to end up creating conditions where there's less energy and therefore less economic growth, and farmers are being hounded and diminished to where there's actually going to be a food shortage at some point. So all of these policies are leading to catastrophe. Why? I don't know. What's the objective? I don't know. Maybe it's a situation where power is exercising power where power can and not worrying about the future. But it seems to me that particularly where Germany is concerned, that the Germans are getting totally and royally screwed. Their power was as a manufacturing power, German industry, German technology, German engineering, and that was in line and aligned with their association with Russia, Russian energy, Russian raw materials, and the United States broke that. And now the United States is benefiting from that policy and the Europeans are not. So it's a very strange situation. I agree, there's not going to be very much that's going to change, unfortunately, and it will take a severe crisis for any of this to manifest itself in some way other than the way it's being manifested now, which is a generalized decline of Europe and the entire West.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. Lisa, what are your thoughts from, I don't know if you're back home in Maine, but what are your thoughts on what's going on this side of the pond?
Yeah, it's surprisingly parallel in the West, if you want to call it that, or the European and U.S. kind of axis of power. It's often been expressed through NATO as an organization, but not always. It seems to me a lot of parallels going on. One of the big themes emerging being that the power structures don't represent the will of the people, and increasingly they don't even pretend to. Although certainly much ink and money is expended and time in pretending that elections are hugely significant. But we keep hearing from various countries, but on both sides of the pond, it's not going to substantially alter the way the wars are conducted, the way the economies are conducted, no matter who wins. One of my favorite quotes was from the musician Frank Zappa, who said something along the lines of, politics is the entertainment division of the military industrial complex. It's something to keep people distracted and talking and, whatever, while the machinations of the real decisions that affect our lives, the quality of our lives and ability of our neighbors and our communities to thrive are made without any reference to what the people want. It's been shocking to me to look at Germany in particular, the amount of crackdown on dissent, on the concept of free speech. I noticed they just banned the upside down red triangle, which has become a fairly universally recognized symbol of the Palestinian resistance. Various branches of Hamas, Hezbollah, using that symbol to show, who's being targeted or who was targeted. You can't use an upside down red triangle in Germany anymore. And I know we have some friends from Maine that are academics on sabbatical, and their report on what you can and can't say, or, you couldn't hang a Palestinian flag out of your window in Berlin without having the police come and take it down. That's happening all over. It may be more accelerated in certain places, less accelerated in other places, but it seems to me that the powers that be are increasingly scared of the people. And, for me, the genocide in Gaza since October, Hamas busted out of their concentration camp, that war, more than anything, has revealed the fact that governments do not represent the will of their people. The people in the Arab countries are horrified by allowing Israel to just slaughter children and civilians on such an industrial scale with their help. Jordan helps them. Saudi Arabia helps them. The weapons are shipped through Cyprus. The weapons that the U.S. gives to Israel are allegedly shipped through Cyprus at a Great Britain's military base there. The people in none of those places want that to happen, yet here it is happening. However, on a hopeful note, it does look like Palestine, Israel could be the last colonial project, in the sense of it's in the process of failing, and it is almost guaranteed to fail sooner or later. Regimes that visit a genocide on civilian populations typically do fall. They are usually unpopular. And of course, there are a lot of economic problems going on. But, Russia and Iran just agreed to how they will conduct their trade aside from the petrodollar. The US petrodollar will not be involved. And, that's easy to say. And the devil's in the details. And it takes a long time for nations to implement those kind of really deep systemic changes. But it's pretty clear that the U.S. and the West in general, and Israel as as the West's imperial outposts in the Middle East, are all in deep trouble, and it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get dangerous. It already is hugely dangerous for many, many people. But a failing empire, especially failing economically, is usually going to thrash around, make a lot of poor military decisions. I say this as a student of history. And in the end, if the regime even endures, it will be much, much reduced in scope and power at the end of that process. Let's just hope nuclear war isn't part of that process, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you for that.
Yep.
You've all made some really very important points and observations. I want to ask you now, three women. A lot of people have said, well, maybe mostly women, the world would be a better place if it were run by women. Now, I want to ask you your thoughts about that. When we look at people like Ursula von der Leyen, Annalena Baerbock, who's the German Minister of War, Kaja Kallas, the former Estonian Prime Minister, who is going to be the new foreign minister for the EU, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And then when we come over to the United States of America, my goodness, there are some of them in Congress that are just as Russia-phobic and warmongering as that. But Sylvia, I want to turn it over to you. What are your thoughts about that? These women certainly don't seem to be running the world any differently than their counterparts that are male. What are your thoughts?
Well, they're not free agents. As I said before, everybody that's in power is in power because the power structure wants them there, and because they accede to the wishes of the power structure. If they didn't, they wouldn't be there. And I mean, I really first began to notice what a female president in the United States might be like whenever I listened to Hillary Clinton's rhetoric. And the war in Russia was supposed to start in the Clinton administration, which was supposed to be elected in 2016. And I think that is still a matter of soreness of the power structure, because of course Russia would not have been as prepared then as it ultimately was when the war started in 2022, because Russia saw this coming and was doing the best that it could to recover from the collapse in the 1990s and the years of the USSR. And I think it's time for us to talk a little bit about this power structure, because there's something that it has been bothering me for a long time, trying to figure out what is going on here. And so I started doing a little research, and in between 1880 and about 1910, about 2 million Jews migrated to the United States from an area it was Poland, Ukraine, part of the Russian Empire, and they were all Ashkenazi Jews who spoke Yiddish. And many of the Jewish people who are now in the power structure are the children of those people. And those folks were forced to live in what was called the Pale of Settlement. There were programs that were run against them. There's a lot of resentment and hatred that stems from that. And that resentment and hatred is directed against Russia. And so we all know that Joe Biden was not in control of staffing of his administration, but I think we should acknowledge the fact that administration is the most Ashkenazi Jewish administration in the history of the United States. And every one of these people are the children of that diaspora that came to the United States from those years, and apparently still harbor not only Zionist impulses, which is in support of Israel, but also basic hatred of the Russian Empire and the Russian people. And so people should know the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is an Ashkenazi Jew, and his two assistants at the time he was first appointed, Wendy Sherman and Victoria Nuland, are also both Ashkenazi Jews. The Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, same situation. Attorney General Merrick Garland, same situation. Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, same situation. Director of National Security, Avril Haines. White House Chief of Staff, who runs the president's time, Ronald Klein, he left, but his replacement is another Ashkenazi Jew from the same diaspora, Jeff Zients. Deputy CIA Director, David Cohen. Science Advisor, Eric Lauder. Deputy National Security Advisor, Ann Newberg. Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman. White House Counsel, Ed Skisel. And then there are all these envoys and ambassadors that were appointed, some 18 to 25. And this is an enormous concentration of power. And that power is interested in two issues. The first issue is the war with Russia, and the second issue is the project in Israel. And this, once again, is an example of what happens when you have such concentrated wealth. Because, as I said in your other shows, Regis, this diaspora of Jews has been incredibly successful in the United States. Some 40% of all billionaires are Jewish, and they control huge corporations in private equity, in banking, in the technology industry, and in media. And so, what is it about this continued hatred and desire to take revenge against Russia that could be driving what's going on now? Because we know that the money system is what controls politics in the United States and in Europe. And I've heard from many sources that some 40% of the funding of primaries and elections in the Democratic Party come from Jewish interests. Regis, you and I talked about the power of AIPAC, the power of these other Jewish organizations. But I had never made the connection before to the Russian Empire and to this holdover of oppression that they felt at the time, and the hatred that generated, that apparently was transmitted to their children throughout their time here in the United States. And so maybe this is part of the reason why we're seeing so much censorship, because nobody, what I have just said, would be considered by many people to be anti-Semitic, and I would probably be imprisoned if I said this and I was in Germany or many other places in Europe. For example, I heard in Germany that the guy posted a picture of his puppy with his paw up, and he was prosecuted because that was supposedly a Nazi salute. There is a great deal of repression that goes on all over the West. It's not only a repression that controls the amount of information. It's not only a repression that concentrates the smear that destroys people, that reverberates throughout the media. For example, we heard about the bombing of the Children's Hospital in Kiev, which now appears to have been the result of a Ukrainian missile, not a Russian missile. And it's all over the press, all over the West. But when the Ukrainians bombed the beach in Sevastopol, that was not all over the media and not all over the West. And so you have not only repression, you have censorship, you have control of information, you have very, very effective propaganda, and you also have all of these mechanisms that have been used, as I just described, in the elections in Europe, that end up twisting the election results so that you don't have the will of the people prevail. And I unfortunately think that Lisa is correct. It's going to take a big upheaval for this to change. And unfortunately, the way things are going, I don't see that a big upheaval is avoidable. Yes, Israel has put itself in a situation to where its long-term prospects have been severely diminished. It's had all of this time to try to figure out a way to get along in the world that it lives in. It hasn't done anything but bomb and oppress its neighbors. It's done nothing but expel and oppress and steal and the Palestinians. And, it's also anti-Semitic to say that Gaza was a huge concentration camp, and that under UN rules, people who are occupied have a right to oppose their occupation. And so to say that what happened on October 7th was an act of terrorism is one way to put it, but you could also say that it was a military operation which was justified under international law. So we live in a world where there are two different information environments. And unfortunately, some people are trapped in the mainstream media information environment, which is nothing but propaganda. And unfortunately, the West excels at propaganda, and that propaganda is prevailing in many parts of the West, including the United States.
Phew. Sylvia, we're going to be smeared as anti-Semites.
It's the truth. As I said, Regis, the facts cannot be anti-Semitic. The
Yeah.
facts that I gave you are true. Whoever put this administration together put it together with the idea that a certain faction would be in charge and certain policies would be followed, and there would be no dissent from those policies. And every aspect of the power structure on the part of the administrative and national security state is in the hands of this power structure, and no dissent is allowed. And the president has nothing to say about it.
Yeah. I think many of us would agree that control is in the hands of the power structure. What you articulated today very bravely were facts, the names of people, descendants of Ashkenazi Jews, who are basically the power structure in the United States government. But above them are those billionaires who control elections, control every decision that's made in Congress, certainly in foreign policy. I started out asking the question, I'll come back to that. And what about these women in Europe that have risen to power? My opinion is, I don't think they got there on merit. I think they were selected, they were discovered, they were groomed and prepared to take over these positions. Obviously, many of them are just appointed positions. Sonja, you're a European. What are your thoughts on these women that have risen to power in Europe? Where did they come from?
Well, first of all, I can start with Ursula von der Leyen. She's the head of European Union. Her background in her family is fascist, Nazi, like not all Germans, but the majority of German parents, grandparents, and so on. Her father was somehow a physician with Heinrich Himmler. It's what I found out. But okay, she was brought up an elite in Brussels. She was born and she was raised in Germany. She was in Merkel's government, and she was actually, not so important because she was Minister of Defense. There was a time in Europe when all women were ministers of defense. The last one now in the Netherlands, Kasia Ollongren, is out now. But this was a crazy idea that they should be women. The women who are in power in Europe are the same as the men, in my opinion. It doesn't make any difference if you're a man, if you're a woman, as long as you keep on doing what they want you to do. This is main important. And me as a woman, I think that maybe some women are even more radicalized than men. This is what you can see with Ursula von der Leyen. But the most saddest example for me is Annalena Baerbock in Germany. She is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She faked her biography. She faked that she has studied, I don't know what study she said, somehow in Oxford, I think, and international relations and somehow studies like that. But if you hear her talk, and I speak German, so I could hear her speeches, and well, for me, it's you can cry. I mean, she cannot even say 3 words normal in one sentence. I mean, she makes so many mistakes in German, and then sometimes she speaks English. Well, this is I cannot bear to listen to her. This is unbearable. So, and she is really dumb. The Germans call her. She is the dumbest Minister of Foreign Affairs we ever saw in Germany. And she's still there. She's still sitting there. So she's the chosen one, because they were all connected again to the World Economic Forum. They were all these, people who, by Klaus Schwab, he chose them. And this is also with Annalena Baerbock. We see it in the Netherlands. We had a Minister of, what I said, of Defense, Kasia Ollongren. She didn't know anything about the military or defense. She was just sitting there and follow the rules of the lobbies, how do you want to call it, shadow government, and so on. The same for Kasia Ollongren. Kasia from the other Kasia. Her father, he was also prime minister, so it's like an elite, coming to power also. They were all young and they all have so much hatred. And I also wrote an article about the Baltic countries. The Baltic countries are the most fascist countries in Europe. because I totally agree with the former speaker that she said that all the Ashkenazi Jews are in power in the US. Well, in Europe, it's more or over a bit the same, but also we have another problem, and that's real fascism, real Nazism, and that we can find in Ukraine and the Baltic states. In Ukraine, there's a Jew, you know, Zelensky, he's Jewish, but I always write, you don't have to be a fascist, and you can be Jewish and a fascist, that's what you can be. But there are real fascists in Ukraine, but also the Baltic states. They have a big problem with the former Soviet Union, so they always remember through their parents that the Soviet Union, you know, went through their countries, Estonia, Lithuania, and they still live in this Soviet Union ideology that they invaded us and they are terrible, they did horrible things. But you know, we must not forget that all these countries, all these three Baltic countries, they collaborated with the fascists, the Nazis from Germany. They killed so many Jews there that was unbelievable. I saw once a documentary that without the help of these people, no, they couldn't do that. So this is the other side of things. And as I was in Ukraine a lot of times, I was in Mariupol, in the Azov steel factory. You still saw the Azov battalion. They are real terrible Nazis. I mean, not particularly against Jews, but I think they're the modern Nazis. They hate Russians. I think they hate nearly everybody. But this is another big problem. So we have two problems. And maybe these Ashkenazi Jews in the US are exploring these groups like they did in the Middle East. They explored ISIS, or they made ISIS, Daesh. So they're using these groups. And now they're using these groups against Russia. I mean, we have terrorism. Every time we have this Crocus shopping city or theater, they were from Dagestani people, but their traces could be led back to Ukraine, to the SBU. And the SBU, we all know, is totally in the hands of the CIA. So the whole of Ukraine is in the hands of the US and the European intelligence agencies. So, I mean, they are using groups. And I totally agree, because I was once part of Stop the Occupation. That's, a foundation for Palestine. And I have read a lot of things about who owns the media, who owns politicians. And indeed, in the United States, I think it's 90% of the Ashkenazi Jews. In Europe, it's a bit less, but in Europe, we are totally dependent on the United States. And the United States doesn't give, anything about European Union or about the European people, because for them, we are only in Europe, we are only people who can be exploited. It's only business what they do, and military. And also here I am, Europe, I don't work for the mainstream media, because I'm totally sanctioned in my country, European Union. But I mean, also with the biolabs, the military bases, I mean, the US, in cooperation with the European Union, they have so many bases, and they did so many horrible experiments also in Ukraine. This is what the Russians find out. Recently today, I wrote an article about it in Dutch, but okay. But it's, it's so dreadful, this world. We can say that I experienced this war. I experienced the Syrian war. I know what Israel is doing in Palestine. I was in Palestine 2010, 2011. This all has to stop. We all agree on that, I think. How can we stop it? Well, it's what said. We need an uprising, a real uprising from the Europeans. And sometimes we see it little by little, but it's not enough. It's not enough, unfortunately. And I think, and I hope not, but this whole thing is going to escalate now, because, we speak about nuclear weapons, and Russia, in Europe, they say, nuclear weapons, Russia is going to throw maybe a nuclear weapon or a tactical nuclear weapon. And well, we don't know. Maybe, I mean, they drive Russia to the edge. And this is really now they speak in the media red lines, every time a red line is passed every time. But I think now it's become so terrible. And we saw it in Crimea, we saw the Crocus, we saw all these terrorist attacks. And I think one day they push it really too far. And to come back to the women, well, the most terrible women for the Russians is Victoria Nuland from the US, because before she left office, she was threatening Russia, threatening Putin himself that, I have a big surprise for you. And 2 weeks after or 3 weeks after, we saw the Crocus shopping city or theater complex attack. So, yeah, this is the most hated woman, I think, in Russia. So, in the end effect, it doesn't matter who you are, a man or a woman, because also Lindsey Graham is a crazy cowboy, as I call him, who is threatening, again, also Russia. So it doesn't matter. They're all orchestrated by the deep state. They all have to listen to what they are saying, to the money, to the power. And in the end effect, this is what is going to happen. And they have the agenda to destroy Russia. And the other agenda is, to destroy the Palestinians or the Middle East. And so, in the end effect, doesn't matter, woman or man.
Thank you for that, Sonja. There are a couple of other very high-profile women, descendants of
Yeah, well,
Nazis.
welcome. It's not very nice. I know. It's. I always try to, have some positive things, but.
Well, I don't. We're going to get smeared for being anti-Semite, but we're talking about facts. We're talking about people. We're talking about their heritage. We're talking about their ancestry and where their belief systems came from. Chrystia Freeland, for example, in Canada, is another extreme Russophobe. The exact same thing. Rose to power. She's the assistant prime minister, or whatever. She basically, using Trudeau, has run that country into the ground as well. And I think the new president of Mexico is also a Jew. I don't know if she's one of the Ashkenazi Jews, but you can't deny this. It's right there in front of our eyes. And as Sylvia pointed out, and Sonja, they are the power structure. It's undeniable. Lisa, what are your thoughts on this craziness?
Well, I'm just going to have to push back a lot and say it's also the descendants of Ashkenazi Jews who are leading the resistance at American universities, camping out. This huge popular uprising in support of Gaza in the face of Israel's genocide has really drawn this line between Zionists, who are responsible for a lot of the suffering and violence, and Jewish people, many of whom say, I don't agree with that. I've gotten a kick the whole time out of the Torah Jews. The very Orthodox Jews have said, we never did believe in Zionism. Don't paint us with that brush. And one of the pressures Israel is under now is that their Supreme Court voided the exemption that on religious grounds for service in the Israeli military, and that's been in place for a long time. Anyway, to return to the question of women versus, women in power, why are they as bad as men? Well, they've clawed their way to the top of a violent power structure. So by definition, as Sylvia keeps pointing out, they're not getting in those positions unless Annalena Baerbock is my favorite clown among all these clowns, because early in when the Ukraine war heated up, she was quoted as saying that Putin better do a 360-degree turn or else. And then, in case you just thought she had a little brain cramp and the wrong numbers came out of her mouth, it happens to all of us, she repeated it a few sentences later. So apparently a rudimentary grasp of the fact that if you do a 360, you're right back exactly where you started. I think she meant 180. She was a gymnast, would think she would know, I think that was her claim to fame. But what I'm going to say is when I think about would the world be better off with women, specifically grandmothers, elder women in charge, most indigenous cultures really value the input of the grandmothers because they're the ones that keep life going, and they're the ones that have experienced some stress, maybe some droughts, maybe famines, maybe earthquakes, floods, and they've kept life going. my feeling about all these power structures we're talking about is they're anti-life. They're hierarchical, and they are really for the ambitious few. So if a woman is one of the ambitious few, she's kind of useless as a decision maker. But if women collectively get together and make decisions on behalf of the continuance of life on the planet, then I am convinced they would make much better decisions than the power structures that we have now that are dominated by wealthy, powerful, mostly males, but of course, females as well. It's, it's identity politics that the US figured out long ago. Oh, make Lloyd Austin, who's Black, the Secretary of so-called Defense. He comes straight off the board of Raytheon to run the Pentagon. That tells you everything you need to know, but he's Black, so it's okay. This is a ridiculous line of reasoning, obviously, but it's also applied in many cases with women in politics. I really think that the whole power structure is going to have to crumble in order for wiser heads to prevail. And I'll just end by saying, when I think about big powers in the world today, and I think about, do they have those grandmother values? Do they have those let's keep life going values, or are they driving us right off the cliff of Armageddon? Russia and China spring to mind as they take care of people. When I hear that Russia has allegedly bombed a children's hospital, honestly, I know it's bullshit, because that isn't how they treat children. And that is how the Zionists treat children, routinely as part of their policy. But I have a lot of hope resting with the more mature civilizations, thought systems of China as it is today, of Russia as it is today, of the two of them as allies, saying we have each other's back, to pull us back from, utter catastrophe and annihilation that the power structure of my country is just racing toward.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Lisa. I want to finish tonight, and I'm not worried about where we're at in terms of the time. Israel, Gaza has come up several times already tonight. The last thing I want to explore with you is what I call the U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza. Where is this all going? And I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but it certainly looks like the United States is a direct participant in that genocide, just as the United States is and has been the direct participant in the war and the slow motion genocide in the Donbass. Sonja, going to come to you first. What are your thoughts?
Yes, they are, and also Europe. I mean, it's not only the US, Europe, and the US tried the Oslo Accords, and it was betrayed. In 1993, there were the Oslo Accords. We all know that. Since 2010, I'm involved with this foundation in the Netherlands. I went to Palestine. I saw the apartheid going on. I was in Al Khalil. I was everywhere, Ramallah. Of course, not in Gaza, because that time already it was like a concentration camp. And yes, okay, we cannot say it, but I can say it because it's the truth. So what they are doing now, it's everybody sees it. I mean, yesterday I was with Al Jazeera, and I told them this is the first televised genocide we see after the Second World War. I mean, you see children die. Of course, we can say a lot of it, it's maybe propaganda, but I don't think so, because many journalists are dead already there in the Gaza. So of course they always bring it. I know as a journalist, you always bring it more, maybe a bit more terrible than it actually is, but it is terrible. It is a genocide, and these are the facts actually there. So, and what can I say about it? It's unbelievable. Sometimes I think that because I lived in Syria also a long time, and up till today, Israel is bombing Syria every week or so. A rocket there, and it's like they hate Arabs. I mean, I don't know about the Israeli people. I mean, how they are educated in the schools. I know there are a lot of Israelis who are against it. I know, but what I heard also yesterday from an Israeli, that they are the minority in Israel itself, so they are the left, so to speak. So the majority is like right people. Of course, we have the Orthodox right who don't want to be in the military, who don't want to fight and don't want to kill. I met a few of them in Beirut. They are this special group in the US, but also they are a minority. So I think the majority the settlers, but a large group are there, and these settlers are coming mainly from the US. So maybe they are radicalized in the US. I don't know about that, but I know. I mean, sometimes I think they had the Holocaust. Sometimes when I think I sit and I think maybe it's their revenge on what happened, yeah, some 80 years ago, could be, I don't know, because the elderly, I saw another documentary where the elderly still, hate Arabs, hate Europeans, everything. So, well, okay, that's something else. But what we see is a genocide. But Israel is, keep on going, and they have the support of the US and Europe. I mean, sometimes they say in the media, oh, terrible, these children are dead, but that's just to comfort the people that, okay, actually they maybe find it a little bit horrible, but okay, what can we do? It's like that. But they're all, perpetrators, because like in the Netherlands, all the F-35s who bomb Gaza, the spare parts are made or produced or renovated, I don't know exactly what, in the Netherlands, and they go back to the US, and the US is sending them to, Israel to bomb the people of Gaza. And also in my speech, I said yesterday that the Arab world should unite. I know there's a difference between Shia and Sunni. I know that, I saw that, I experienced it all, but in this case, they have to unite. I know the majority of people of Gaza are Sunni, but the people, the Shia people of like Lebanon, like Hezbollah, and all the other groups are now in the axis of resistance, and they are helping the people of Gaza, or helping, they are in this war themselves. I was 1 week after the 7th of October in Lebanon, Beirut. I tried to go to the south, but because, I know a few people in Hezbollah, it was not allowed. I know why, because, the attacks were not only since 7th of October, the attacks on southern Lebanon were for years already. That's normal there. So they are now united in the axis of resistance. And this axis of resistance I saw in Syria. And it doesn't matter how big your military is, because we know the Israeli military and the US military is very big. But you cannot win from people who are really loving their country, and who are really, well, they are a little bit fanatic, I must admit that. But with this fanatism, they won the war in Syria. And of course, with the help of Russia, we all know that. But I think when the people there in the Arab world unite, I think the US will go out, and Israel, I don't know what they will do, because a lot of Israelis don't want to fight. I mean, it's like Western people, it's like European people who they tell them now to fight for World War III against Russia. Well, I think the majority of these young people don't want to fight. They don't maybe even know how to fight, or because they are, they're Westerners, and yeah, they don't care about their countries. And these people there in the Middle East, they care very much about their countries. So I think the only way to win is the Arab world has to unite. This is what I said on Al Jazeera. And the atrocities are very, very bad. And I think we see the climax now of this genocide. And I think maybe, that's what I hope, with the help, the mediation from Russia, let's hope they will get at least, some sort of peace. But I mean, the Israeli politicians, they have to be on trial, and not on trial in the ICC in The Hague, but I mean in another country perhaps. But yeah, we see a genocide. But okay, it is not the first genocide, of course, and the world forgets very quickly, unfortunately. So, but something has to be done, and I think Israel is weak. They say they are not weak. Of course, they have the nuclear option, but their army is not really motivated. I know that. So yeah, let's see how it will end. Of course, very tragically for the people of Gaza. It's unbelievable that people sit and say, okay, now yeah, I'm still in favor of Israel. So, wow.
Oh, thank you for that, Sonja. Well, you've been on the ground in that part of the world. You lived there for a number of years. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you. The U.S. Israeli European genocide on the people of Palestine. From where you sit, um, how do you see this?
Well, Rich, just to bring it back to where we started, which was talking about the presidential debate of the two presumed nominees, was it incredible to see them competing, or at least Trump was competing? It's hard to tell what Biden was really doing, to see who could be the most pro-Israel. And at one point, Trump, in his schoolyard bully type style, called Joe Biden a Palestinian, as if that was a slur and a very bad thing to be called. That was kind of incredible, wasn't it? So the American people, voters, are sitting back going, so if I vote for this party, I get more genocide. And if I vote for that party, I get even more genocide. Those are my choices. Again, it makes elections look less and less relevant. But as far as how this current horror against the people of Gaza will end, I would agree that if the Arab world would unite, follow the lead of their brethren in Yemen, and apply pressure where they could, that would bring it to an end swiftly. But their financial interests are at stake there, meaning, Saudi Arabia's and so forth. Iran, of course, is mostly acting as a proxy or through its proxies up until now. So supporting Ansar Allah, supporting Hezbollah. But, if they came in actually as on their own, Iran said, we will put a stop to this genocide of Palestinian Arabs. That would be interesting because they're not even Arabs, they're Persian. But certainly the only power in the Middle East that is likely to, and also able to meaningfully intervene in Israel's attacks on the Palestinians. We keep saying Gaza, but I think the West Bank is nearly as bad as we sit here talking today. It's really been killing people every single day. And the settler violence rampaging out of control is another aspect of this attempted genocide of Palestinians. So, it's hard for me to predict what will happen other than the U.S. will continue. People always want, again, it's this play acting like, oh, Biden's really mad at Netanyahu, as if it matters how Biden feels about another head of state. This project to allow the Holocaust to happen during World War II in order to weaponize anti-Semitism and make a huge land grab in the Middle East, in a region that as a child I was told, oh, it's a people without a land for a land without people. Like are we talking about the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, where Asia and the Silk Roads meet the Mediterranean? That's a land without people? What the heck are you talking about? It's a very rich region with a hugely long culture. And, it's just been amazing to watch Israel deliberately destroy the whole health infrastructure of Gaza, deliberately, both the people and the, infrastructure, deliberately destroy the educational institutions of Gaza, deliberately. They're calling it like scholasticide, raising all the universities. It's been very deliberate and just gloves off brutal. So of course, most of the rest of the world stands in horror, saying, I don't know what's going to bring the Zionist regime down, but I hope something does pretty soon, because this is, a horror that we've never seen on our screens before. Yes, there have been other genocides, terrible ones, and they're going on right now. But the immense effect of people on the ground showing us what that looks like, and then young people using social media to get around the corporate media, which is completely captured by the power structure, but just on a person-to-person basis say, hey, here's what my friend in Gaza recorded and sent to me last night. That is a game changer. So hopefully the game will change soon. That is our prayer.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. You know, another promising sign is the economic impact on Israel caused by two major things. The Houthis bombing ships with supplies to and from Israel. This has had a huge impact. And the international boycott are two things that have impacted the Israeli economy. There's a third thing, that because Israel has to call up so many of its reserves to fight, many of these people are active in the workforce in key sectors of the Israeli economy. So these three things are also making Israel not just look weak, but be weak. Sylvia, over to you for the last comment.
Well, you know, Israel was never structured to fight these long wars. You know, the saying that we keep hearing is Israel expected every war to last 6 days. Uh, the Israeli military has been exhausted in Gaza. There's no question about that. They do not want a war with Hezbollah. Netanyahu apparently does. Some of the power structure in Israel does, but the military does not. I agree. Israel is weaker than she seems. As far as the genocide in Gaza, there are now reports coming out to where as many as 200,000 people have been killed. The entire area, which was of historic importance, has basically been bombed to smithereens. I don't know, even if the war ended tomorrow, where these people would live or how we would go about trying to reconstruct a society there. And yes, the war in Gaza has been used as an excuse to accelerate the displacement of Palestinians on the West Bank. I understand more land has been grabbed since October the 7th than since the signing of the accords in 1993. So yes, this is intentional. This is an ongoing effort to depopulate and to annex those areas. That's the objective, and then we'll see whether or not Israel wants to go with the greater Israel from all the way to the taking up part of Iraq and Syria and all of that. It's a crazy dream. And I want to compliment both of the ladies that have been here on their comments. I think they've been exceptionally astute. And it's been a pleasure for me to be a part of that conversation. I also want to acknowledge that, as you will recall, Regis, when we had those interviews about the entire question, I pointed out on many occasions that the entire Jewish community is not on board with this policy. Most Zionists, not all Jews are Zionists, and not all Zionists are Jews. My comment about the administration and the stalking of the administration was that this had been an opportunity for Zionist Jews to take overt power on a formal basis within an administration, and they took that opportunity. It's also true that many of the people that were arrested on college campuses were Jewish. It's also true that most of the Jewish community does not go along with this. How can they? I've had many Jewish friends. They're some of the most ethical people that I've ever met. There's no way that the entire Jewish community can possibly go along with this. And as far as Sonja's comments are concerned, yes, the legacy of World War II and the occupation not only resulted in the hatreds that we see, but the United States used that opportunity to empower these Nazis in Ukraine because they thought they could use that as a tool against Russia. So there's a lot of things going on that can't be sustained. And particularly what's going on in Israel can't be sustained. I understand we're talking about a third collapse of the Israeli economy, a basic uprising on the part of the military. The society is very divided. It's a society that has been sustained and built on propaganda, anti-Arab propaganda, and it's now coming home to roost. And so, they say it's a curse to live in interesting times, but those are the times that we live in now. So, Regis, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity, and I especially want to thank Lisa and Sonja for their astute comments.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sonja. My hope is to continue with a show like this with the three of you and another one of our friends, Maria Nikolakaki from Greece, who's been with us. I think you provide some really valuable insight that we're not getting from the echo chamber that's really taken over social media. So I very much appreciate each of you as a friend. I know each of you personally, and I want to welcome you back probably within another week or so, because so much is happening so fast. So thank you for tonight, and let's keep hoping and praying that there's a positive, hopeful end to all of this madness.
Thanks,
Thank